In this tutorial, you're going to learn how to paint out a lavalier mic left on someone in an interview using Fusion. We're going to use the surface tracker to stabilize the area, and then use the paint node to try and remove the mic. We'll also look at another paintout method by sending the plate to Photoshop and using Generative fill to make a cleaner paintout. Then we'll unstabilize our paintout work and reapply it back to our main plate. With our footage in Resolve, we'll head over to the Fusion tab. Scrubbing around the footage, I'm looking at the movement on the microphone to see what frame is the best one to start tracking on. The first thing we'll do is bring up the surface tracker. Pipe in our footage into the yellow foreground of the surface tracker. Pressing 2 on the keyboard brings the surface tracker to our viewer. Scrubbing the footage, I'll start our track on the last frame of the shot. With the surface tracker selected, we'll draw an outline around the area we want to track. In the Surface Tracker Inspector, hit the Mesh tab. Change the point locations from Automatic to Uniform Grid. Hit the Track tab. Hit the Track Reverse tab since we're on the last frame of the shot. Scrubbing through, we can see the movement of the mesh. Go to the Result tab and change the output from Warp Input 2 onto 1 and change it to Stabilize Warp Input 1. Now as we play the footage, we will see the stabilized result. We can see the track is not as stable as we want it to be. Change the output back to Warp Input 2 onto 1. Go back to the Track tab, bring up the slider in the motion range. Bring down the slider on the mesh rigidity. Make sure you're still in the last frame of your clip and hit track and reverse again. Go back to Result and set up the output to stabilize Warp Input 1 again. This is better, but still too much movement for what we want to do. Hovering our mouse over the mic and hitting play, we can see it move around instead of appearing fixed in one position. Go back to the last frame, go back to the Bounds tab in the Surface Tracker. Instead of tracking just the selection around the mic, we're going to widen our bounds to track more of the shirt. Go to the Track tab, bring the motion range up, reset the mesh rigidity, and change the quality to better. Track backwards again. Go to the Result tab. Now we have a much better stabilization we can work with. Add a paint node downstream of the surface tracker. Hit 2 to send it to the active viewer. Up here we have the option between multi-stroke, clone multi-stroke, and stroke. We're going to select stroke. In the stroke settings, I make it a habit of setting the duration longer than the total amount of frames in my clip. Set duration to 200. Select the clone tool, go to the first frame of the clip, hold down Alt and click an area we want to clone from. I'm going to aim for this yellow thread to extend over the mic. Cloning over this selection, we're trying to remove the fold in the cloth leading up to the black shirt. Now I'll alt-click underneath the mic and try to add a more defined edge to the fold. Moving to the black part of the shirt, we need to fill this in to look like the shadow that the mic was in. This kind of paintout starts to get difficult because we're mainly dealing with gradient of black instead of a pattern or texture. Paintout over a gradient will be a lot less forgiving and harder to hide. Once we're done, we can scrub through the shot to look for any issues or parts that may drift. Now it's time to reverse the stabilization we did in the Surface Tracker to make the paintout move along with the original footage again. Select the Surface Tracker and copy it. Paste it after the paint node, Take the output of the paint node and make sure you attach it to the green background input of the second surface tracker. Then take your original footage and pipe it into the yellow foreground input. Select your second surface tracker, go into the Result tab in the inspector, change the output from Stabilized Warp Input 1 to Rewarp Stabilized Clip. Now when we play our footage back with the second surface tracker active in our viewer, we'll see our footage moving like normal again. Now let's copy our first surface tracker again and paste it to the side of our node tree. Pipe in your original footage into the yellow input of the new surface tracker. Go to the Result tab in the inspector and change the output from Stabilized Warp Input 1 to Warp Input 1's Alpha. This will create a matte that we can use to control the composite and the blending of the paintout. Let's add a merge node downstream of the original footage. And then let's add a matte control after the surface tracker that rewarps our footage. Take the output of the surface tracker that we're using for our matte and hold Alt on your keyboard when you let go of it on the matte control. This will give you options for what input you like to select. Select Garbage Matte. In the inspector for the matte control, toggle down Garbage Matte and change the channel drop down from Alpha to Luminance. Then check the box to invert it. Now we just have our paintout affected area on its own. Select the surface tracker that is acting as the matte and bring up the softness to feather the edges. Take the output of the matte control and add it to the green foreground input of the merge. Send the merge node to your active viewer and we can see the result. Looking at it playback, there's some tweaks I want to adjust on the paint node to help clean up sloppy work. I'm just going to paint over areas using the same techniques from before. I'm also not happy with the inconsistent black levels on the shirt cloning. I'm going to bring in a background node. In the inspector, drag the eyedropper to sample the darkest black of the shadow in the shirt. Take the output of the black node and drop it onto the output of the paint node. This will create a merge node combining them. Next, go up to the top here and create a polygon node. We will use this to create a mask. With it selected, draw a mask of the same shape as the shadow. Now take the mask output and apply it to the blue mask input on the merge node. With the merge node active in the viewer, select the polygon and tweak the soft edge slider in the inspector to feather the mask out. This gives us a more consistent black that will cover up the mic better than our hand painting did. Send your media out node to the viewer. Go to the top and select the AB selector. On the A side, we have our media out after all our paintout work. Take the media in node and drag it to the B side of our viewer. Now we can easily compare our before and after. If you wanted to stop here, this would be a fine place to export. I don't think most people would be able to tell what we did while watching in the context of the edit, but there's an easier and faster way to get a better result if you're not happy with your manual paintout. Make sure you have your Media 1 original source selected and active in the viewer. Then make sure you're on the last frame of your footage where we've been doing all of our paintout work. Right click in the viewer and select Save Image. I'll name my image lavmic_paintout_4ps. Then set the file type to PNG. Now over in Photoshop, I have our still frame imported. Using the selection tool, I'm going to circle our mic. Holding Shift and making more selections will add them to your current selection. Hit Generate Fill. I'm going to leave the prompt blank, then hit Generate. We'll get 3 options to choose from. I'm going to hit Generate one more time and see if I can get any better options. I think this one looks the best. Turning off our layer below, we'll see our Gen Fill creation with the alpha channel. Go to File, Export, Quick Export as PNG. I'll rename this with Clean Plate in its name. Bring the Clean Plate media into your Resolve project. In the Fusion tab, open up your media pool and bring in the still into the composite. We're going to merge the still frame in right after the Paintout node. Select the Paint node and hit Ctrl P to disable it. Now if we look at our final output, we'll see how our Paintout is handled. I noticed some clear value changes between the original shirt and Gen Fill Paintout. This is normal to see in Gen Fill content as it starts to get manipulated by color tweaks or in the surface tracker warping. Setting up 2 viewers, we can put our Gen Fill in the left viewer and our final output on the right. After our Gen Fill Paintout, we can add film grain. This will help break up any banding and help blend into our scene better. I'm going to set the strength of the grain to 0.045. Going into our final output viewer, we can toggle through each individual color channel for red, green, and blue to see how our grain matches. I'm going to set my grain size to 3.54. Selecting the film grain node and hit Ctrl P on and off helps me show how much the grain is affecting the image. I'm going to bring my grain size back down to 2.973. And I'm also going to bring the strength down to 0.0013. There's no exact values for this. You'll just have to make your best judgment depending on the shot you're working on. The next thing I'd like to do is fix the hard edge between the original footage and the Genfill Paintout. Bring in another polygon node and draw a more contained mask, cutting off the outer edges of the Genfill. Then connect the mask to the mask input of the Genfill Media In node. Select the polygon and bring the soft edge slider up to feather it. If you adjust your mask, make sure you uncheck the keyframe that is set on the frame when it was created, or else it'll begin to animate over time as you adjust it. Now when we go back to AB our original clip, in the new Paintout we can see a much better result. Also make sure to go back and disable the merge node using Ctrl P, that was bringing in the black background node that we created earlier. And then at the end, I make sure to clean up and rename all the nodes so it's easier to figure out the next time I have to open this project. If you like this tutorial, check out a previous one where we use similar techniques to remove a water bottle. I'll link to it in the description below.